do you do? I'm Dusteroo. I want to talk to you about licenses in Dead by Daylight. You know, the only reason we're still sitting here today? I could have made something of myself. Perhaps been a CEO or an ice cream man, something big. But Dead by Daylight had to get license after license and become successful, trapping me in this cage. But the past is the past, so let's talk about today. Instead of the usual, what are the biggest licenses we want to see in Dead by Daylight? Jason, Predator, FNAF, Candyman, hell, even Nickelodeon's Jimmy Neutron are always brought up in conversations regarding wanted licenses. But what about the ones we rarely hear about? The ones that people would like, or mention here or there, but nowhere even close in comparison to the few we hear every time speculation season comes around. Every year the well gets drier and drier, so eventually these names will need to come up. So that's what we're talking about. This is 10 licenses Dead by Daylight needs that no one talks about. Part 1. Movie licenses. We're gonna start off real strong with a horror icon, the girl in red, Carrie. Carrie has some logistical issues I'll cover in a moment here, but let's discuss who she is, why she could be a killer, who's her companion survivor, and the map they would play in. Carrie was a social outcast from her school, developing around a particular and strong kind of crazy. This left her with little social skills and no knowledge about who or what she is in a lot of ways. Eventually, this leads to her snapping under the tremendous amounts of stress and humiliation, and she lets the intrusive thoughts win. They laughed at making her red, so she paid them back in kind and turned them all red. And mush piles. And ashes. The students won't be laughing much after that night. Carrie has very powerful telekinesis abilities that could make even a Jedi jealous, and a very chilling and iconic look. Her map, without question, could be the high school, or the burnt or bloody version of it, in which the prom had been taking place. A high school map or any school map would be an awesome inclusion into the game. Her survivor, no doubt, would be Sue Snell, a girl who at first took part in Carrie's bullying, but eventually develops a conscience. And then she tries to make it up to Carrie by getting her boyfriend Tommy to take her to prom, so she can have a good night and feel like a normal girl. After everything happens, she has tremendously mixed feelings and emotions, as maybe she could have done more to stop Carrie, to save all her classmates, her boyfriend, and even Carrie herself. At the end of the film, she's one of the only ones left standing and will be forever marked with these regrets and fears from this moment in her life. So the big issue with Carrie is these are literal high school students, Carrie being around 16 during all this, and she dies by Game of Thrones Season 8, the most tragic and bitter deaths of all. But behavior is no stranger from altering pre-existing lore for licenses just to make them work. Silent Hill has Cheryl get taken a decent amount of time after the third game wraps up, dealing with a whole new chapter in Cheryl's life entirely. Yoichi was a child during the events of Ringu and basically became a custom character for the game. Who says in some alternate timeline Carrie actually survives the night of the prom and goes on the run for a couple years before making a deal with the entity. Just enough time for her to turn 18 so we don't have a bunch of Dead by Daylight artists turning into criminals. Funny enough, after writing Carrie out, I realized how much I would like her to be in the game, so this is one of my more hyped licenses actually. So another license that DBD will need to stretch the lore a little bit on, and that's The Omen. You know, Damien, the literal devil child. I suppose they could figure out a way of having Damien be a child in the trial. I think the best course would be to have Damien as a young man before he became a politician, and after he was causing chaos and diapers. We could have the Omen 3 version, but the Omen 1 look is a lot more iconic, so if we just aged him up a little bit, I think that'd be the coolest way to bring this to Dead by Daylight. His tagline could be The Omen or The Antichrist. Lots of power ideas that could be done with him. The survivor could be Damien's adopted father, but I really like the idea of the former Satanist, Father Brennan, who tries to warn Damien's father about him being the Antichrist, dying in the process and then being eternally tormented in the trials for his role in helping push that evil into the world. Compelling, especially if it's Damien doing the punishment. The map? Obviously the family's Victorian manor. That would just be mwah, chef's kiss. So, The Omen. Apparently no one knows this one. It's Annihilation, which is a really cool movie with a very thought-provoking and confusing story. And villain? I would highly recommend this if you enjoy films that make you think about why you're seeing what you're seeing, and what else is happening that's not really directly shown on screen. Skip to this time code if you don't wish to have it spoiled, because the killer and the power idea are basically the biggest of spoilers. So Annihilation is about a comet that crashes down into the Earth under a lighthouse, which causes this massive and ever-expanding area called the Shimmer. Everyone on the outside of the Shimmer just sees this force field of refracting light and colors. Think of an entire box of crayons being blended together and then turned into an energy shield that you can move and see through with no issue. Everything in the Shimmer has its DNA and molecules being subtly bounced around like light trying to escape with nowhere to go, just constantly interacting with everything all the time. Flowers and organic material, and in some cases non-organic material, being altered and reformed into singular or completely new beings. Examples of which would be this alligator with shark teeth, several flowers blooming from the same stem, and most hauntingly, plant life whose structure starts to take on the appearance of human bodies. Basically, everything is slowly becoming one, or completely new. Cancer imagery is very on the nose in the movie, especially since it's mentioned several times. Eventually, Natalie Portman reaches the source of the Shimmer, and we see some ethereal being that describing it would be a monumental task. We do see a Shimmer being, an early clone of a character, with hardly any features, but it becomes something or someone eventually. Annihilation shares a lot of similarities and issues with the alien from The Thing, but with some crucial differences that would make it easier to adapt into the game. While The Thing is hostile, the Shimmer just is. It does not harbor ill will or fear that we know of, but rather it just grows and exists, and all the gene alterations and likely eventually singularity is just its nature. It's very much like a tumor. It's not doing what it's doing to harm or kill the host. It's not attempting to steal or remove intentionally, but rather it came into the world and exists the way it does. It does not know any better. It can't. So when it comes to powers that mimic and clones survivors, it could be more of a distraction or a set dressing rather than a deception tool like the powers thing would need to be. Clones just exist and confuse the survivors, but does not actively attempt to harm them. A lot of potential for completely match-altering experiences, unlike most of the cast. The map could be some uncanny valley-like location, a forest, a beach with glass trees, and blooming flora never before seen on Earth. No doubt it could be made the most visually interesting map in the game. And the survivor 100% is Natalie Portman. Of course it would have to be her stunt double, as DBD does not even have close to enough Portman cash. But the best part about the film was it was such a financial bomb that the rights are probably going to be cheaper than anything else in the game. It could even be free. But it is a great film, I'm not lying about that. It Follows. You remember this movie, right? It's basically if sexually transmitted diseases were an old woman walking down a hallway. It Follows is about a supernatural entity that kills people in the lewdest version of tag you've ever seen, where you have sex with someone and it passes the curse on to them, and this slowly moving creature will find and kill them and move down the chain back to you, so moving the curse to someone else only buys you a little time. This creature is only visible to those who are cursed, and it shapeshifts to different forms it feels can intimidate or deceive anything really to get close to its target. This could open up the creature as an interesting case where it appears to be in different forms to who is perceiving it, and possibly working something like Old Freddy used to. It's another harder one to adapt, but very possible and very rewarding if something creative and interesting could sprout from it. The survivor, of course, would be Jay. There's not much to say on her. She has an interesting enough look, I suppose. The map is kind of a struggle for this, as you could do a neighborhood similar to Haddonfield, but we know how that usually plays out in this game, so maybe a beach would be a better idea. Not a lot to say on this one. It's been like 6 years since I've seen this film, so I'm a bit rusty on the details, but I still think it's a cool idea for a chapter when all the other icons are all used up. Little Shop of Horrors. I love this movie. I'm generally not into musicals, but here or there, one does catch my attention. And Little Shop of Horrors does it the best. It is a glorified stage play, and played more for comedy than horror. At least the later adaptation is. There is an older one that's more in line with horror aspects, but I only care about this one, and Audrey 2. A giant plant monster running at you is horrifying. Just these little vines waddling on the ground. He could be cool. Campy, but cool. Of course, the survivor could be Seymour or Audrey, and they would both work pretty well. Seymour is probably a better pick lore-wise, but Audrey would be more interesting visually with her very unique look. Plus, we already have one nervous geek in the fog, why would we need another? Skid Row seems like the only map that could be done. It's not a neighborhood in the conventional sense, a jam-packed street with alleyways and abandoned buildings, and something. It could be a fun, campy chapter, once again, when all the bigger icons are all gone. A Quiet Place. This movie was massive when it came out, absolutely huge. People wouldn't shut up about it unless they were making some "we have to be quiet" joke. It was good, not flawless, but good. And then Bird Box came out, and the many imitators came in and tried to get some of that "the senses used against you" money, and hype around the IP faded, as it was not so special and unique anymore. Lots of people still have enjoyment for the films in their hearts, but it's all covered in cobwebs and dust. But it should be good to go if we give it a good old clean up again. The monsters from A Quiet Place, while looking like a stretched out Demogorgon, are very intimidating and have a very interesting idea. Out of most of the IPs I propose in this video, this chapter has one of the more straightforward powers to adapt. They are all about sounds, so the idea of them being a tracking killer using survivor sounds against them in countless different ways is a no-brainer. Like interacting with scratch marks or being able to hear movements far away. With monster and animal-like characters no longer off the table, they seem like an easy inclusion, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a Quiet Place chapter in a couple years. Survivor, Emily Blunt, or better yet, Jim Halpert, both would work very well and be very cool to see in Dead by Daylight. The farm seems like a great map to do. You could have a ton of small details, booby traps even. Survivors who run on the lines of sand around the map will have heavily reduced sounds. Lots of small details. You could even have the fireworks be usable by survivors to cause distractions or for fun. With the recent Alien map, it shows that they are experimenting with new map mechanics and map traps. This could be a huge exploration of that and make the map something unique and interactive. More people should talk about A Quiet Place in Dead by Daylight because I think it works better than most would expect. So here's one I always laughed at whenever I heard it brought up, but as time went on, it started to make more and more sense and kind of grew on me. That's American Psycho. Patrick Bateman. No Sigma memes, I promise. Well, maybe a little. He has kind of been claimed, and if he was added to Dead by Daylight, 100% that would be a big part of his inclusion in the community, at least meme-wise. But memes aside, he has a lot of components to him to make a good killer to include. He can start off prim and proper, but as the match progresses, he becomes more unhinged and wild. The more blood on him, the more crazed he becomes. He could also deliver some chilling and comedic lines, just like Wesker.
Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not, you stupid bastard?
The fact he's a wolf in sheep's clothing, hiding behind wealth and elegance and prestige, but is actually a bloodthirsty and heavily disturbed individual, is something we don't really have in the game as of yet. Wesker's the closest thing to that, but he's an anime villain, so I don't really count him.
I don't need anyone else. I have Ouroboros.
When it comes to his rampage, whether it was all in his mind or not, doesn't even matter. This could be his playground, or this could be the place where he finally lets the mask slip and indulges on those impulses. He gets a bad rap, but seriously, he would be a big addition to Dead by Daylight. Sure, you could do Hannibal, he would be a great contender, but Bateman would be great as well. Map-wise, you could do a skyscraper, a business building. The Survivor, I'm not too sure. If I'm being honest, I haven't seen this film in what's probably close to a decade, so I do have some catching up to do. But I do think he's worth considering. The Thing. Yes, The Thing. This one is brought up quite a bit, but still very infrequently compared to many of the other licenses. One of the bigger reasons I think for this is everyone not knowing what the power would be, besides just pretending to be another survivor, which quickly gets torn apart by Survive with Friends. I don't agree though that that's all he can be. I think there are a lot of ways to stay true to the Thing and still make it a good and fun killer to go against. I have so many ideas they could do with the Thing, I could even make a whole chapter about it. Hint hint. I won't go over powers for now because I hate spoilers, but just know that there is a lot of room to work with regarding this shape-shifting alien. Survivor being anyone besides MacReady is not gonna fly with me. Give us RJ. When it comes to the map, tell me you wouldn't want the Arctic base. If you try to, I'm not going to listen because I don't believe you. Instead of the usual walls around the map, you could have snow or ice stacked so high, there is no escape. I'm about to pull a memory out of your head you probably forgot about. Tremors. You remember those big-ass sandworms that were chasing Kevin Bacon all over the desert? Yeah, you remember. Well, it's a great film, and just the concept of a character traversing through the ground is terrifying. Not like Alien or Demo, but imagine they burrow under the ground to travel faster, and the survivors see the ground shifting and the dirt flying into the air. They can't stop or stun it. That is tense. These big worms come in several forms and sizes, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that one could be changed or altered to fit Dead by Daylight's needs, to have them make a little more sense as a killer in the game. They are cool creatures that let us finally make use of the ground as an actual tool and mechanic, besides just traveling through some tunnel. Survivor? It could only be the man, the myth, the legend, the worm hunter himself, Burt Gummer. I've only watched the first 3 films probably, but he is and always will be one of the highlights of the series, the best pick for a Survivor overall. The map? Easy. Small desert town from the first film. Just a couple small buildings, homes, shops. It's small enough to basically contain the whole town and not be a massive map. This is my most wanted character in Dead by Daylight. Not my most wanted chapter, that definitely goes to BioShock. There is a lot of other licenses who don't get as much light as they should, that I could have put here, but I really want this to be said. If one character feels like a perfect fit for Dead by Daylight more than anything else, it is without a doubt Art the Clown from Terrifier. I know he gets a decent amount of traction when people bring it up, but not enough. I feel Terrifier has become one of my favorite horror series since watching it earlier this year. And Art, without a shadow of a doubt, one of my favorite horror characters ever. He is relatively young compared to a lot of his contemporaries, but he holds his own very well. His visual design is memorable and dynamic. He can go from goofy and hilarious one second to completely ravenous and disturbing the next, and both work perfectly. He is a completely vile character who mocks and plays with his victims just because he can. He's not super strong or has the power of teleportation, he's just a regular guy who can come back from the dead and has a creepy little girl giving him supernatural information and assistance. But he himself behaves like a regular, granted twisted man. He thrives off brutality for all we know just because he enjoys doing it. Is it too over the top at certain parts? Absolutely. There is several parts of this film where they're just trying to shock you as much as they can. But it kind of works. With how Art is portrayed, it feels fitting to be so extra with the methods he does, because Art, while being playful and joking, is incredibly mean-spirited. He does not have the lovable charm one could allow for a killer like Michael or Freddy. He is a completely repulsive individual who, while entertaining, you really just want to see him get his ass beat. And he does, over and over and over again, and it always feels good. Especially with his mute motif, he screams and reacts to pain like how most of us would, but not a single sound is released. He screams in silence, and this whole package paired with his mesmerizing performance by David Howard Thornton, he will be one of the few horror characters past the 90s who could reach a place as a horror icon like Michael and Freddy, if the overwhelming gore does not hold him back from being appreciated by a larger audience. We will have to wait till October 25th, 2024 to see how Terrifier 3 does. I think this film will make or break Art becoming either iconic or just a cool horror character. Enough glazing, I'll save that for the Terrifier chapter video. Who would be the survivor? Well, the only one with such an awesome final girl outfit, Sienna Shaw from Terrifier 2. Look at this Valkyrie outfit she has on. It is so badass and cool. And it's not even just a costume either. She represents that character and absolutely just goes in on Art and even beats him with his own weapons. She already, for me, could be my favorite final girl of all time. Does not mean I think she's better than some of the other final girls like Laurie Strode, but it's hard not to cheer her on as she goes off fighting in that outfit. The map should probably be the abandoned Terrifier funhouse / abandoned carnival. It's dark and a very scary location with a setting we don't really have in Dead by Daylight yet. And no, I don't count the carnival randomly outside a church for some reason. While it is neat, it's kind of a simple and boring way to do a carnival map for Dead by Daylight, which would go incredibly hard. And that's the end of the movie licenses video. I hope you liked it. And come back on Tuesday if you're interested in video game licenses nobody talks about, because that's when I'm releasing that video. Was there any movie licenses that you would like to see in Dead by Daylight that wasn't even mentioned in this video? Please let me know. I do read most of the comments, so maybe if we do a part 2, we can include some of those. But anyways, thank you all for watching. I'm Dusteroo, and I will see you all real soon. Bye-bye!